Hello, can you all hear me?
I can hear you, yeah.
Okay. Unfortunately, there was a bit of technical difficulties there, so we couldn't hear the mayor of Boston introducing. Is there any way we can restart that, do you think?
We sure can.
Okay, let's take a take two.
Absolutely.
Welcome everyone as we restart. This is called rebooting.
Hi, I'm Mayor Marty Walsh, and I want to thank Toy Burton and DeeDee's Cry for the incredible work they do in the Boston community all year long. And I want to thank all of them for organizing this event today. Mental health is just as important as physical health, and seeking and accepting help is a sign of strength. That's especially true right now. The pandemic has added a whole new set of challenges to everyday life. For people who were struggling before, it can even be harder to manage this added weight. I'm here to tell you it's okay to feel fear and anxiety. We'll feel that for some time. This is an important time to take care of yourself. We're all handling this the best we can. And the only thing we can do is take one day at a time. If you need someone to talk to, you have options. You can call your healthcare provider to get set up with a telehealth counselor. Or you can call 311 at the city, our hotline, to get connected to anonymous counseling over the phone. I know that DeeDee's Cry is going to share some important resources with you today. I want to thank the panelists for coming together and sharing their stories. In times like these, it's important to support one another and find ways to connect. I wish you all the very best, and I thank you for creating a positive change in our community.
Well, thank you. That was our mayor of Boston, Marty Walsh, thank you. Then I'd like to welcome everyone out there in Facebook Live world. My name is Robin Saunders as we start tonight's session of DeeDee's Cry as we present mental health while Black. And want to remind you tonight to come with open eyes, open ears, and an open heart. We're going to have an honest discussion tonight. We have special guests, we have panelists, and we have a moderator. Before we do that, just want to let you know that as you're listening, if you want to put any questions or comments in the chat, that I'll be moderating that, and we'll probably ask questions if you have questions of the panelists as well. But before we get on with the program, I would like to say thank you to the sponsors that made tonight possible. We want to thank Louis D. Brown Peace Institute, the Roxbury Unity Parade, and also Java with Jimmy, a talk show that you can catch on Facebook Live, all for supporting DeeDee's Cry tonight. Also, we have to especially thank our sponsor tonight, the Cape Cod Cape Verdean Museum and Cultural Center, and also Boston University School of Social Work and the Falmouth Human Services. Tonight, we are actually, it feels like we're teleporting or something because even though we're on Zoom and we could be with anybody, anywhere in the world, tonight we're bringing our attention to friends down the Cape, and that's courtesy of our special guest tonight, Barbara Burgo. But before we introduce all our friends and panelists tonight, I'd like to introduce you to DeeDee's Cry and the founder, Toy Burton.
Thank you so much for that, Robin. Hello, everyone. My name is Toy Burton. As Robin said, I am the founder of DeeDee's Cry Suicide Prevention and Family Support. DeeDee's Cry is named after my sister, Denita Shayne Morris, who died by suicide in 1986 when she was 23 years old. I started DeeDee's Cry in 2017 when I noticed that organizations that focus on suicide prevention and mental health awareness really didn't do their events in the Roxbury, Dorchester, Mattapan areas, so communities of color. And I wanted to make sure that mental health awareness was accessible to people of color. So DeeDee's Cry events are always free, but if you can give and you would like to give, please visit our website, deedescry.com. And we will let you know at the end how you can support us. But thank you all so much for being here, and thank you, Barbara, for connecting with us.
So tonight, our special guest is Barbara Burgo, and also our panelist is Neisha Deed, James Hills, Christian White, and also Toy Burton. And we have the moderator, our special own, our in-house doctor, Brandy Brooks. So right now we want to turn the mic over to Brandy as we start our program.
Thank you, Robin. Thank you, everyone who is listening. Thank you all for joining us. If you've been on any of the DeeDee's Cry virtual events before, you have definitely seen my face. I've been on all of them. And so what I'm going to do tonight, I'll briefly introduce myself, but I really want to get into the panelists' stories, get into the panelists' trials, you know, because it's very important during this time. There's so much going on. Politics, COVID, police brutality, there's just a lot going on. And then there's events going on locally in our own communities, you know, bills that are being ignored or not voted on. So there are things that we need to talk about, we need to discuss, and these conversations are so important to have. So to start, again, hello everyone, my name is Dr. Brandy Brooks. I've been in the mental health, public health field for about 15 years now, as a contract manager, a trainer, and now just as an advocate. And so tonight, before I really get into our panelists and their stories, I do want to say to anyone listening out there is that we are going to talk about suicide. We are going to talk about depression. And those topics are very difficult. They can be very challenging. And for some of you listening, it may dredge up some feelings, some emotions for you. And if that occurs at any point, anything any panelist says brings up emotions and thoughts for you that become a little bit overwhelming, please step away from the computer, put down your phone, take a moment, breathe, collect your thoughts, recenter, refocus, and then rejoin the conversation. Because as we'll talk about, and many of the panelists will mention, self-care is very important. Now more than ever, it is important. And so with that being said, what I'd like to do, as Robin had mentioned earlier, Barbara is really the catalyst for why we are here this evening. Barbara attended one of our in-person events back in February, which seems like 27 months ago. But back in February, when we were in person, when we could do that, Barbara attended one of our mental health while Black events. And she put a bug in Toy and I's ear. She said, you know, I really want to get involved. This is important information. And so what I'd like to do is actually hear from Barbara, our first panelist. And Barbara, if you could, in your, you know, once I turn it over to you, if you could share why this topic is so important to you personally and professionally, and why specifically you feel it's important for residents of the Cape. So Barbara.
Thank you very much. You can hear me? Okay, great. I appreciate this. And as you heard, my name is Barbara, I'll say Montero Burgo, because Montero is the name of the brothers that I have lost. I'm the proud sister of the dearly departed Richard Allen Montero and Robert Michael Montero, and loving daughter of Lorraine Annette Fonseca Montero. I say their names because for years when I did, people would cringe because their lives ended by suicide. I want them to be celebrated with as much meaning and respect as anyone else who died. I am the clerk and curator, as they said, of the Cape Cod, the virtual right now, Cape Cod, Cape Verdean Museum and Cultural Center. Soon to, I hope, be opening in Falmouth. But the Museum and Cultural Center President Wesley Late, Treasurer Wayne Lobo, and fellow board members, Patricia Oshman, Belle DeBarros, and our dedicated photographer member, Karen Hines, along with the community members and supporters who have eagerly awaited programs like these in support of our connections in spirit, culture, and humankind. We give all the glory and honor to the organization of DeeDee's Cry, its co-founder, Toy, and the blessed members of this panel. This has made my 40-year dream come true. It's allowed us to talk about mental health, and especially while Black, in this forum. And Deb Berglund helped out, BU helped out. But why this is so important for us on CAPE is just because everyone imagines, everyone is lulled into thinking that Cape Cod is this beautiful paradise. It's sold that way to tourists. To residents, it is many times the same reality as you have right there in Boston or anywhere where Black lives don't seem to matter as much as white lives. You deserve the warmest respect and praise for your kind gestures in doing what you're doing. People have need to diminish the fear and depression and agony that Black folks have all over. Losing my brothers was the hardest thing that has ever happened to me besides losing our mother. But what I know is that my oldest brother died in 1978. My baby brother committed suicide in 1994. Of course, here we are in 2020, and I can't help but wonder, it's chilling to consider how many people we have lost along the way. Every board member that I told you I talked to, when I said, could we please do this? Will you give me your permission and a vote on this? Each one of them emphatically yes, because every one of us knows someone who has died of suicide, or the suicidality, like we know, people have not quite completed the act, however you say it with political correctness. Please help me with that, doctor, yes, when you say it. But
yeah, the attempt survivors, suicide
attempt survivors. Thank you very much. However, someone had said to me, well, when do we want to do this? Of course, I said yesterday, last year, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, now. And we rushed to get this done within a month, less than a month. And in that month, 2 Black teenage boys and 2 white teenage girls have attempted suicide. And their friends who have taken the time to talk to me about this could talk to me because I mentioned we are having this forum. I mentioned that I am the sister of 2 young Black men who commit suicide. I talk about it every chance I get. And sometimes people say to me, well, you've got to let this go. But I know Toy and you, all of you here, know it's not that we need to let it go. We need to find answers. We need to help those that are still suffering. And some of us take things on that's happened to us desperately like this as a cry to hear, as we hear others' cries for help. I was the chair of the Barnstable County Human Rights Commission 3 years ago. And we start off with, in the fall, generally, other than this COVID year, we start off with a session that introduces the students to human rights, all of their human rights. And each school that has participated on CAPE, and usually there's a dozen or more school groups that participate. We have over 100 students in the room. Each class takes on a project, whether it be the environment, whether it be LGBTQ issues. And every time we start brainstorming about what else do we think we need to address, the students in all 3 years that I attended said they want to address suicide. They want to talk about or find a way to make sure that they and their friends are safe and healthy. They try to talk to the teachers about it. Of course, the teachers aren't the correct people to be talking to about this. I don't believe they have your skill in this, Dr. Brandy, or the credentials is what I mean. But we come to the spring, we come back again, and 3 years in a row, I noticed that none of the projects were about suicide. People are afraid to talk about it. So I'm trying to dispel the myths and minimize or eliminate the stigma and let people know that Cape Cod isn't all sunny beaches and warm sand. There's a lot of suicide here.
Wow. Thank you so much, Barbara. Thank you for that introduction to the work you do and, sharing the story and the loss of your two brothers. And I think one of the things you mentioned, which is so important, is the importance of conversation, the importance of awareness, because if those young people didn't know that you were having this event, would they have shared? Would they have come to you with whatever they were struggling with? And one thing I do want to say, Barbara, you mentioned, is that while teachers may not be clinically trained, I feel, and others in the field feel, that anyone, any of us on this panel or anyone out there listening can help someone in pain, because all you really need to do is be a listening ear. Now, if they express and you hear some other things coming up, of course, you want to get them to a clinician, but sometimes that conversation with you, the person they know and have rapport with, is what can save their life until you can get them to the clinician. So I do want to make sure everyone understands that while we're not all clinicians, that's okay. We're all people who have compassion. We're all people who have empathy towards others. And we're all people, if we give ourselves the time and space, that can listen and offer an ear to someone who may be in pain. And that's very important as we talk about this and go throughout this tonight. So what I'd like to do is kind of shift from Barbara a little bit and go to Neisha, because Neisha's story is a little different from what Barbara shared. And I think it really highlights things that are going on right now, just in terms of within our community and the struggles within our community. And so I'd like to shift to Neisha, and Neisha, if you could unmute and share your story and share with those listening, when did you know you needed help? When did you know you needed support? And then how did that support come?
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Brandy, and the other panelists that I'm sharing this night with, and especially you, Barbara. Your story, I thank you for sharing and being so open and honest. You speak with so much passion about your brothers, and thank you for opening up and allowing us to share this with the Cape Cod family. Good evening, my name is Neisha Deed, and I am the founder of an organization called Pure Spark. I actually didn't start working and getting active in the mental health community until 2 years ago. What got me to doing this work was not a straight path. I started my career off in accounting. I was there for about 15 years, and I spent the last 7 years of my accounting career in Washington, D.C., in the Washington, D.C. area. And, about the last month or so, probably 2 months that I was there, I was not doing well. I was working crazy hours and I was stressed out, and I saw all these warning signs that I ignored, didn't pay attention to, because I was about getting the work done and being a strong Black woman and not letting anyone see me be weak, right? And I even had friends reinforce that, like, oh, don't tell them you can't do that. They're going to think you're weak, you know? And so I kind of pushed myself more. And what that did was kind of get me deeper and deeper into a depression. So bad so that I attempted to end my life. I took, some pills, and I had wine that had never opened, and just wanted to end it all. But my family and friends, reached out, and they didn't hear from me for one day. That one day was the day that I attempted, and I was woken up by police officers and my leasing company at my door, and they were like, "You don't seem like you're doing okay. Are you all right?" And I tried to lie at first, but then when the cops came, I was like, I can't lie. The evidence was right there. And I went to the hospital, and I stayed there for some time. During 2017, it was Christmas, December, and it sucked. But my sister was there, and I had family waiting on me saying, hey, we got you when you get out, and we're going to make sure that you're going to be okay. So I talked about the warning signs, but I'll share just briefly the warning signs that I missed, just in case it might resonate with some people who are listening in. The warning signs that I was not paying attention to that I missed were my appetite. My appetite decreased. I wasn't eating. I could hardly even drink a smoothie. I wasn't sleeping. I was an insomniac for pretty much a year, even after treatment and stuff like that. The most amount of sleep that I probably got was like, I don't even know, on a good night, maybe an hour. And I was isolating from all my friends, and normally I'm a social person. I like to be around people. So for me, that was very abnormal. And all of those warning signs were present, and they kind of were bad, and they got worse. And then, the suicide attempt happened. So after that, fast forward, I had lost another family member to suicide. And at that point, it had been 4 family members. And that's when I decided that I was going to go, and out myself pretty much, and tell the world, like, hey, look, this is what has happened to me. Don't be like me and ignore the warning signs. Get help. It's okay to ask for help. It's okay to lean on your family. You're not weak. You know what I mean? Like, nothing, you're not a bad person. Don't be ashamed. It's okay. If we broke our foot, we would tell people we're going to the hospital and getting our foot checked out. But for some reason, because of the stigmas related to mental health, we don't talk about it. And I think Toy and the work that she's doing to make sure that these stories are told, so that, people can take away that shame. You don't have to be ashamed about your story. It's not who you are. It's just a part of your journey,
Thank you, Neisha. And something you brought up, which I want to highlight just a little bit here, is you brought up the risk factors and some of the warning signs that you were seeing. And the one thing I'll say with that is everyone has different risk factors. Everyone has different warning signs. But the ones that we see over and over again for individuals are like an Access 1 disorder. And for those of you familiar with like the DSM-5, Access 1 disorders are your affective disorders. So your depression, your bipolar, your schizophrenia, those are things we see. However, not all the times are they diagnosed, and not all the times do people seek treatment and or receive the appropriate treatment for those diagnoses. So, but that is something we see. Another thing we see is loss. Loss is so huge, whether that is a loss of a family member, loss of a pet, or loss of some type of cherished relationship. And loss is huge. We have to pay attention to individuals that may have lost, or loss of job. Think about that, especially now with everything going on locally and nationally. That identity, that loss of your identity. And for some people, their job is their identity. And so loss is a huge one as well. What we also see, again, as Neisha said, is appetite. This idea, you're not sleeping, you're not eating, you are not doing the things that you would normally do and take joy in. And another thing, James just reminded me of one of the panelists when we talk about loss, housing. Think about that, losing housing. Again, any type of thing that keeps you grounded, when you lose that, it can definitely put you in a precarious situation. And so we have to pay attention to this, and we have to make sure that we support each other. Like for you, Neisha, you mentioned that when you weren't in contact for a day, your family knew something is wrong. And it's just like Toy, it was more of a funny meme she put up on her, I think it was on DeeDee's Cry, but she said, what are 5 words you could say to your family that they would know something is wrong, right? And for you in that situation, your family knew, Neisha's not picking up her phone, something's wrong. And you may have said some things to them before that they said, this isn't right. And so I encourage anyone out there listening, there's a laundry list of risk factors and warning signs that you can look up on different sites. But the most important thing is that either in you or in your loved ones, you know you best in terms of the changes. You're sleeping, you're eating, your lethargy, you know you. So just really stay in tune with yourself and with others around you. And if something is amiss, and I always say this, whether I'm talking to youth or anyone else, I always say, while you may speak to someone and they may be like standoffish when you're like, I think something's wrong, let's talk about it. They may be like, oh, no, nothing's wrong, nothing's wrong. In this field, we would rather someone be frustrated with us or upset with us and still have them here. And so it's very important, if you see something in one of your friends or even in yourself, say something to someone, because it can save a life. And so I want to shift a little bit to James, put him on the spot now. So James, Neisha talked about kind of, how her family stepped in for her and literally saved her life that night. And so I wonder if you could, in sharing your story, say, what are the things that saved you and continue to save you and bolster you? I know you're smiling, because you knew I was going to do this.
I did. I actually did. And
well,
it's funny.
I'm going to do it. So James, if you could, in sharing your story, because I think it's important, because you have a platform now with Java with Jimmy, just like Neisha does with Pure Spark. And it's important for people to hear from you, like, how are you able to continue to do what you're doing, helping others, when you were in the midst of struggle?
So in the tradition with Java with Jimmy, and if you all watched it before and I see Toy laughing and Brandy, I'm going to Dr. Brooks, we're going to sidebar and have a consultation one-on-one after this one. It's interesting. And I was texting with Toy just around some tech stuff, and I started to text her and tell her that this one feels different. So shout out to you, Barbara, for whatever reason. Shout out to the CV community, whom I love. This one is different. And I say that because it feels different. And to your point, Brandy, I'm sitting here listening to what everybody is saying. And I think Neisha said a couple of things. You said a couple of things. I remember one of the times we've spent time together, you know, when I was transparent about the struggling. Neisha talked about not eating, not sleeping, you know, and I'm in the midst of dealing, you know, with stuff like that, trying to manage, be intentional about self-care. But I believe if I remember your question directly is how do I handle, can you remind me, Doctor? I know it's one that put me on the spot, but yes.
No. Just in terms of sharing your story, in terms of
Yes.
when you had those moments where you
Mhm.
were struggling,
Yes.
and if you know, feel comfortable sharing those moments with us,
Yeah.
but also what helped you, where,
Okay.
you know, where were you able to find support? And then also not just finding support, but trying to support others.
Okay. So I took notes to be sure. It's different being on this side of the mic, not interviewing. There were a couple of times folks was talking and I got ready to, but nope, Dr. Brandy's the moderator. So in sharing my story, I will try to be intentional about that. I, you know, am 48 years old. I am a gay Black male, and was born to a teenage mom, fatherless. I was the type of kid that, you know, was kind of smart. I, you know, had a lot of sisters, so grew up around females, and I jumped rope and all of that and everything that comes with that. If you don't know, being teased. I think that was, Brandy will appreciate this approach, the early onset of me recognizing, you know, my sexuality, that I was different. And all at that same time, two major environments that caused me to struggle was growing up in a faith community and then growing up in Bromley Heath housing projects. So I'm a Black man growing up in a Black church in the bricks and everything that comes with that. Not the most masculine thing in the world. And it was very, very interesting growing up. And in retrospect now, I realized that there was anxiety, there was depression, there was bewilderment. I don't know if you all seen the movie, what was it, Moonlight? You know, on one side you got a crew that's like da 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 da, but then on the other side they're like, yo, what's good, bro? You know, so all of that came with that. And in retrospect now, I think specifically to what DeeDee's Cry talks about, and Ms. Barbara, what you talked about, thank you for being so transparent and sharing your story. The one thing, and it's funny because if you grew up in church, you'll kind of get this. Suicide wasn't an option if you grew up in the Black church, because what they told you is that if you committed suicide, that is an automatic straight ticket to hell. And like I just have to be transparent and tell my story. For me, that when there were times, and if family is watching now, and I know they're going to be like, wait, what? When there were times when I was so just hurt, depressed, frustrated, aggravated, when the thought entered, that was the first thought that I thought I would, you know, bust hell wide open. I think the second thing was, the getting into what saved me was, that was an aspect of my faith. But the other thing was, it was my faith. It is continually my faith, though not practice what it was traditionally the first 40 years of my life. It is still a strong foundation. Just catch you all up, you know, growing up in the projects, that was my first cycle of dealing with violence. I'm 48 years old now. This is like my fourth cycle of dealing with violence, first as a teen, then as a youth worker, then as someone in programming and understanding policy, and now someone that's trying to move policy and then feel a level of responsibility to be accountable to people in the community. So Brandy, that gets to your point that with this platform, with it being daily, one of my board members mentioned to me some months ago, she said, James, you have opened yourself to access to any and everyone that they have to you. It's not just access, but it's also heavy. And it is very heavy. And I gotta honestly say, Brandy, being authentic, I have not mastered self-care. Neisha, my eating and sleeping schedule is ridiculous. Sometimes I purposely take off the watch because I don't want it to tell me that I got 2 hours and 38 minutes of sleep last night. you know, so, and Brandy, you've always managed somehow. I'm looking around, just making sure, because I feel the waterworks, but I didn't bring no tissue tonight. But my story, in spite of all of that, is one still, you know, of victory. And even, you know, with all the stuff that I went through as a young man, I believe I still turned out all right. And I would say, if there is any young man, older man, thug, or whatever, that is dealing with your issues of sexuality, and it gets you into a space because of whatever you feel persona that you have to present for the older ones, you know, I'll say to the young people first, you're not alone. And I would suggest, as Brandy says, sometime find someone that you're comfortable and talk to, but you are loved. You're not weird. There's nothing wrong with you. So I would say that to the young people. To the older ones that may be struggling, dealing with issues of depression, anxiety, feelings, or whatever, I would say that you could talk to someone as well, and be honest with yourself. And then also, if you get to a point, not just around that, but just being able to talk to someone, maybe consider a therapist or someone to talk to, and not just around, you know, sexuality, whatever. But from my experience, I just thought tonight, if someone was out there that was listening and dealing with that in silence and in quiet, and there is a lot of men and women, boys and girls that are dealing with that, to let you know, because we know that in that population, there are teenagers that are dealing with sexual identity issues, and the number of teenagers that have taken themselves out of here by suicide is great when they're dealing with that. So I felt compelled that in my story to speak to that. And though faith is what holds me and my praying grandmother, it's also those that are around me. It's few. And, you know, even if you have a few, that's okay, as long as you have a couple. And even if you feel like you don't have someone, know that someone somewhere in this world loves you and thinks about you. You know, so my story is one that to somewhat is a normal Black male experience in Boston, an urban city. And it's one that has humble beginnings, and through opportunities, but then also making huge, grave, multiple mistakes, I've been given opportunities to be to a little level. I've evolved a little bit. So Dr. Brandy, that's pretty much it for me. I got out of it without shedding a tear. The consult's going to be real, sis.
Great job. Great job.
James, I was not trying to do a red table talk. I really
no, red face talk, Jesus.
I wasn't trying to bring you to the red table.
James. I need to thank James for sharing. I've been waiting for you to come out of your shell.
Yes.
You have done that tonight. So
now Toy's going to make me grab the tissue.
No, we Toy and I've been waiting.
To hear that. Somebody needed to hear that. So thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
I needed to hear it. Thank you so much.
Oh God, y'all are I'm about to turn the camera off.
You sounded like what I went through with both of my brothers, Richard in 67 to 78. It took 10 years and 4 attempts before we lost him. And Robert, he first tried to starve himself to death. And then how he took himself out is too horrific for here right now. But also, I know you got to get to the next person, but the effect that it has on the family. My mother died of a heart attack at 73 years old, coming home from church in 2001. After Robert died in 94, I knew she wouldn't last much longer. It's hard on the whole family. And for Black men, you're absolutely right. Not just in the church, we were Catholic, but in the CV community, in the Black male community. I didn't grow up on Cape. My mother was born here and I moved here in retirement, but I grew up in Taunton. So it's not quite Boston. It's not quite the project, but our family had a house backed up to Paul Bunker Drive, the project, the toughest place in town. And that's how my baby brother got into drugs and alcohol before he took himself out. But it was, I'm sure, watching his oldest brother die, or trying to die 4 different attempts that caused this young boy from the age of 11 years old on to start medicating himself. The last 6 or 7 years of his life, he was in NA, and he'd gotten a 5-year, medal, and he was, he helped so many people, but his brain was destroyed. And so that's what we're trying to do. And I thank you so much for sharing that with me. I'm the one who had tears.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Thank you. And Dr. Brandy, we still got, I know it wasn't your intent. And we say that just for those of you that are watching, but it Toy. Yeah.
Yeah. James, I felt like you said, you background in the church. And so you'll get this when I say this. I received that.
Yes, ma'am.
You just said I received all of that.
Yes, ma'am.
Somebody needed to hear it.
Yes, ma'am.
Important. And the one thing I'll say is, what I heard from James's story was it's a process. When we talk about struggling with mental health, struggling with depression, it's a process for the person struggling, and it's a process for the family. It is not a 1, 2, 3 step, I check it off the list and now I'm better. It's a day by day, sometimes years, sometimes the rest of their life. And so we have to acknowledge, while you say, you aren't doing the things Neisha is doing, but you're doing the things that you need to do for you. And that's important. And we need to acknowledge that, is that, again, everybody's different and everybody's process is different. And how we all get through this is different. And so it's important to acknowledge that. And I want to uplift that and thank you again for sharing your story. And so in shifting, I'd like to go to Christian, because Christian's story is interesting because it's not just about the process with Christian, but it's also the process of Christian as a father and, going through that process with your teenage son. And so Christian, I'd welcome you to unmute your mic, and hopefully your camera cooperates with us, your internet, for the next couple of minutes. But Christian, if you would, share your story with everyone listening. Mm-hmm. Because of some of the work you do, I'd really love for you to share, how it has impacted your son and you, just as, you're trying to build, and as you always say in your talks, break those chains.
Yeah. Thank you. Shout out Neisha, but really quickly, shout out James. Proud of you. Very, very proud of you, because the reality is there's somebody just like us that was waiting for us to say what we just said. I truly believe that.
Yes, sir.
So my story, which I've recently been pondering more when I think about the generational stuff, is my story started before I was even born. Everything that I experienced in my childhood, from the sexual abuse to the physical abuse, to the mental abuse, to the neglect, was experienced by my father, his father before him, and his father before him. In so many ways, it seemed natural that I would have that assigned position in life. I would argue that I grew up depressed and just didn't understand that it was depression to give a label to it. I can remember being 5 years old, being outside of my body, up on the ceiling, looking down next to the ceiling fan, looking down at the bottom bunk at that little boy who was being raped. And I would laugh at him, and I would make all kind of jokes about how, that it was him going through that, not me. Until as you get older, you realize that you're one and the same person, and that sometimes you do things mentally to figure out a way to get through something physically. And I would do this as one of my self-defense mechanisms all the time. Another one would be is I would just shut down. I would literally try my best. We lived in a small house. There were a lot of us. I would do my best to just hide. I grew up with that mentality that if I thought that I was invisible hard enough, then I would be. And I turned out that I could never make myself invisible like I wanted to. Time goes on. Around the age of 13 is when there was the next major shifts in my life. And I want to be clear, when it came to the depression and the post-traumatic stress and the antisocial personality traits, there was so much about me that if looked at from an untrained eye, you would have just called me bad. You would have just chalked me off as, wow, yeah, we see this kid need help, but he's not reachable. So around 12 years old is when things started to shift for me. So the abuse happened from about the ages of 3 to about the ages of 12 and a half, and about 5 nights a week average. Around 12 and a half, my abuser sat me down and he told me that we couldn't do this anymore, that I had to be normal now because we were older now. And I was like, what the fuck does that even mean? Be normal now. I thought I understood normal this whole time. And time goes on. A few months later, I'm 13, and my dad sat me down. And I just want to just point out very quickly, when I'm giving these ages and dates, this is because there's traumatic things happening all the time. So the way that I understood how to keep track of time was when something abnormal outside of the normal abnormal took place. So something had to totally be off, or like a glitch in the matrix had to totally shift my pattern to where I had to pay it attention. So when I was 13, I met my biological mom for the first time. And it was an incredible experience for about 2 days. One of the things that I loved about my biological mom growing up was that she never hurt me. And that was because she simply couldn't, because she wasn't there. So she was the very last imaginary friend that I had, which was very painful at 13, going through what I'm about to tell you. My dad sits me down and he told me straight up he couldn't afford me anymore, so I had to leave. And I really didn't know what to do. We were given the option of moving in with our biological mom, who lived in Kentucky at the time, who we just met. Or we can move to Roxbury, Humboldt Ave, and move in with my Uncle Ray and Aunt Gloria Hammond. I chose to go with my aunt and uncle because at least it was in Massachusetts, it was Boston, I was at least close to everything, I could still get around. I already knew I was stressed out, at least I could do the things that were keeping me a little bit sane, which at this time was drinking malt liquor very, very heavily and smoking weed all day long. Matter of fact, I'm used to about 3 hours of sleep at night. The only time that I was ever able to sleep was when I was drunk. The only time I was ever able to sleep as a teenager and into my 20s. So my dad says we have to leave. So my brother and I, we end up at my aunt and uncle's house. And my aunt and uncle are both pastors. And the transition from the life that I had lived and was raised to be to the life that I found myself in was more of a culture shock than the first time I ever went to Walpole or Shirley Max. A much bigger culture shock. I could not receive love in a healthy way. At this point in time, my understanding of love purely revolved around the need of somebody who wanted me physically. That's all I understood love to be. The only way I felt loved was if somebody took advantage of my body. It was the only way that I connect the feeling of love to it. So as time goes by, about 6 months passed since I moved in with my aunt and uncle. And I couldn't handle the love so much that I went to the court and I asked to have a child in need of services. Now it would be called a CRA, but back then it was DSS. And I asked to be put in a foster home. I was well aware I had friends in foster homes, and I knew the type of crazy shit that went on in them. And I needed some of that craziness in my life. And I needed it from a household. I didn't need that craziness from the street. I needed the household craziness, because there was a distinction between the two. In the streets, there was no sexual element to my self-destruction because the streets didn't accept that sort of morality. And on some levels, the streets saved me from that particular part of the self-destruction, though it provided me with many other ways to self-destruct, which is where I start to calculate my suicide attempts, because I truly believe participating in the gang culture is a form of suicide. That's my personal belief. So as time goes on, I find myself picking up cases. So I end up going to foster homes, residential homes. I eventually go AWOL. I end up on Humboldt Ave in Homestead. And now I find myself heavily involved in the activities of the neighborhood that are the most negative, most violent. And I loved and cherished these moments, not because of any acts that I committed, but because of the love and the validation I received after I would commit these acts. And the more strenuously I would commit these acts, the more validation I would receive. And I was so starved for attention and love and to be held and to be reminded that I'd be okay, that I ate this love up, even if it was a distorted, misconstrued form of love. And I caused a lot of people pain, mentally, physically, and I caused myself a lot of pain, mentally and physically. So I've been home for 5 years. The last and final time I went to prison, I was 27 years old, and I was sentenced to 10 years for illegally possessing a firearm. When I went to prison, my son's mom was 8.5 months pregnant. When I came home, he was turning 9. During the sentence, I saw him once when he was 10 days old, once when he was 14 days old, and then twice when he was 2 years old. When I would see him next, he would be about 8.5, and I would see him when I was in a pre-release. I had no clue what kind of dad I would be. I just didn't know. I knew that I owed this young man because this young man did not ask to be here. Also, my first understanding of what a father was my father. So my assumption was, allow me to teach my son everything that my father did not teach me. And what I came to find is if in any way, when I approached new activities with my son, with the old thinking that I attached to what my father did or didn't do, I realized that I was robbing my son of a fresh start, of a new opportunity. And the way that I provide these opportunities for my son is by dealing with my own mental health and being open to learning more about myself in turn, because that helps me learn more about my son, and it helps inform my particular parenting style, because I believe that our children can teach us how to be the best parents for them. And so when I speak about the breaking the generational cycles, first and foremost, I became the whistleblower in my family when it came to the sexual abuse. There were others that had spoken about it in their personal capacities because they needed to deal with it. But in terms of a large scale, this happened to so many of us. I was the first to do that. And that caused certain rifts in my family. And in the beginning, I regretted it, because I did not like seeing people feel uncomfortable or hurt or reminded or re-traumatized. Yet I understood the absolute necessity of speaking those words out loud. I was molested. I was raped. I'm a man. This happened to me. It happened as a child. And I think so many people forget that as children, it's not a man. When we tend to look at men who were abused, we tend to look at them as men who were abused. These were children that were abused. Children. And when we talk about children being abused, we're talking about genderless things at this point. We're talking about people being hurt. It was important for me, as I began to gain self-respect and self-worth, to begin to use my story to show others how common this is within families. Forget society, within families. And I wanted my son to understand very clearly that he he is going to get the best chance at life that I am here to provide for. And the way that I do that is by continually addressing my own mental health needs and continually being open and receptive to his needs. For instance, and I always laugh about this, I'll never forget one day my son said to me, he comes into the living room and he says, "Dad, I love you. You're a great dad. But," I'm like, "What?" He's like, "We need more variation in our diet." And I'm like, "The fuck are you talking about?" So at this time, he's 11, and he tells me that we eat too many ramen noodles and that we eat too much cereal and that we need some fruits and we need some vegetables. Now, previously, I would have kind of been like, there might have been some ego involved in my response. But now I can learn from him. He can learn from me. And I'll end with this. There's something that Neisha talks about, and actually all of us talk about it. We talk about some of the things that we do prior to these attempts. The last time, most of the time I've ever hurt myself, whether through cutting, taking a pill, it was to hopefully just somebody noticed, gave me a hug, and it fulfilled the need for a moment till I felt overwhelmed and did it again. There were about 4 times that I've actually tried to hurt myself to the point I did not want to live. The last and final time I did that was 2006. And my plan was I was going to go to a bar called Packy's, and I was going to drink myself into a stupor, and then I was going to go into the adjacent field and cut my arms up. Right before I left the house, I had $2,500. I gave it to my uncle. I had a gold chain. I gave it to my uncle. Him and my aunt were asleep in bed. It was about midnight. I walked into the room and I gave him a kiss on the cheek, and I gave him all of my worldly possessions that I felt brought value to my life. I walked out of that house and I knew that I wasn't coming back, but I came back. And I learned later that my uncle was scrounging the streets looking for me because he understood what I was doing. And I want to say, if you can take a moment to take inventory of how you feel in your healthy moments, take that same time to figure out how you feel in moments of stress. And even if you can't deal with the pain of the stressor, write a note, remember it, because it will recur again. And the more you become attuned with these recurrences, the more options that will become available on how you can respond to them. But thank you for letting me talk. I always appreciate this, always. Thank you, Toy.
Thank you, Christian.
Thank you.
I swear, I love just being part of this because I always walk away with new information, new insights, and I feel so blessed to be able to moderate and share with you and learn with you and grow with you. So I appreciate all of you, all of your questions, all of your stories, and everything you just shared. And, you know, Christian, I think the one thing that I always love about your story is you talking about generational, you talking about wanting to do better and be better, not just for you, but for your son, so that he can lead the life, you know, that you want him to lead without all the things that you've experienced or your father experienced or your father's father. And so I'd like to shift and end with Toy before I ask a few questions of all of our panelists. But Toy, I'd like for you to share your story and talk about, you know, some of the things, because Christian mentioned, you know, especially towards the end of his story, those time periods where he recognized, this isn't right. Something isn't right with me. And then he can look back on it now, he can reflect on it now and say, oh my gosh, these things saved my life, you know? And so Toy, I wonder if you could share your story and speak to some of those moments, because you are really the catalyst for bringing this all together. And so your journey to get to here is definitely saving lives. And so I wonder if you could talk about those moments when your life was saved.
Yes, thank you so much. Thank you, everyone, Barbara, Neisha, Christian, James. I'm just totally, I love it. I just totally love it because I know that when we share our stories, we chip away at the stigma that surrounds mental health in communities of color. Somebody needed to hear that today. And I just want to say thank you for sharing. So I'm going to start my story when my sister died. So when my sister died, I was 19, but that wasn't her first attempt. So when she died, I still didn't believe it. I really thought somebody did something to her. I thought that she was better. I thought that things was okay. She had a son. They just moved into a new apartment. And I thought things was going well. So when the police came and knocked on our door and told us that she had died, that she had taken her own life, I was angry. And I didn't want to be angry at her. So I was angry at God. And I cussed out God. I was like, how can you do that? How can you take her away from me? She loved me. And just before she died, I started drinking. I started drinking New Year's Eve, and she died that March. So once she died, my drinking started becoming more often, more heavenly, more straight, like more vodka, more Bacardi, more everything. And that's what I used to numb the pain. And then eventually I was introduced to crack. I started smoking crack. And after some time, it wasn't doing what it was doing. I was hurting and I didn't want to hurt. And I tried to take my own life. I felt like my kids would be better off without me, because I had my girls when I was a teen. I was 15 when I had my first daughter, and 16 when I had my second daughter. So like I said, so 19, my life was swirling out of control. And by the time I was 25, it wasn't any better. So I thought for sure that they would be better off without me. I felt like I was an embarrassment to my family. I was in a relationship and the guy was beating on me. So I just really wanted to check out. I just wanted to stop hurting. So what I did is I took all this stuff that was in my bathroom underneath the sink and I drank it. And once I started feeling the effects, I realized that I didn't want to die. And I went to my neighbors and told them what I did. And they called the ambulance and I was taken to the hospital and they pumped my stomach. And they sent me home. No services, no anything. So I was still in pain. And what I used to do, I was a cutter because the physical pain would take my mind off of the emotional pain. And, I just would do little cuts and cover it with my sleeve and nobody would know, put on a bracelet and stuff like that. And it wasn't until 1998, I spoke to God and I said, I don't want to do this anymore. I don't want to hurt anymore. I don't want to think about suicide anymore. I don't want crack anymore. I don't want alcohol anymore. And that was my first time speaking to God from when I cussed him out when my sister died. And that was almost 22 years ago. So what I can say is that I'm happy that my family was there to support me. I'm happy that my mom was there to take care of my daughters when I couldn't. I was happy. I'm happy that they loved me when I didn't love myself. And I'm just glad that I have their support. And I'm glad that I have this platform and you guys, because it really does help keep my sister not alive, but that she didn't die in vain. That through her that we are helping other people. So I just want to thank everyone for that. And I want to thank you, Brandy, and you, Robin, and James. And y'all know I don't even like talking.
But Toy, you do it wonderfully. Like you don't understand how much, like, and again, I've heard your story at least now 50 times. But every single time, I kid you not, there is something else I learn, or there's something else I know someone needs to hear. Like, you know that. And so while you may not love to speak, the words that you do speak are powerful and they are heard and people are listening. I cannot say that enough. You are loved, you are a blessing. And we thank you for putting this all together and bringing us all together. And so what I'd like to do, if we can, because I know Robin's looking at the clock now, but I'd like to do a round robin, if we can, with the panelists. I'm going to ask you a question. And if you could, keep it brief. Okay, let's be brief.
Like 30 seconds brief? Like, you got to define brief.
Yes, 30 seconds, Christian. 30 seconds. Because I know we have some orators and some, preachers and some, seminaries on the call, but if we can be, okay. So my question to all the panelists is, what is the one thing that you hope someone listening hears from your story or learns from your story? What's the one thing? So, Toy, since you finished us, what's the one thing you hope that anyone listening or watches this later learns from your experience and your story?
That even though at that time I couldn't see the light, and it didn't seem like the storm was gonna end, it does. It truly does. So hold on. Better days are coming. Take it from me. It does get better. Even though it may not feel like it right now, it does get better. So hold on.
Barbara, what would you like people to hear from your story or learn from your story?
I'd like them to learn what I still am trying to learn, that there is hope. There still is hope for us to end suicide or minimize it, destigmatize it. I didn't become a doctor like you, like I wanted to when my first brother died, because I felt there was nothing anybody could do to help us. It was such a long, arduous journey. And my mother attempted somewhere in the middle of all of that. And then my baby brother, and then my cousin. And I said by the time I was 30, I had lost so many people that no one could help. This forum helps in many other things that have happened in the last decade, or I wouldn't be here trying to give others hope like I have found.
Thank you, Barbara. Christian, what do you hope others listening get from your story?
My hope is that hearing my story, it's 100% understood that for me to be where I am now, it was very intentional. It was very hard, recovering from a lot of these mental injuries that we incur at young ages. It's hard because it develops a pattern in you that's not necessarily something you want to be. So I hope in hearing my story, you get hope from it. And at the same time, you understand that this is a journey that you're going to have to want for yourself, for yourself. That's what I hope.
Thank you, Christian. Neisha, what do you hope people listening heard from you or from your story?
Yeah, well, I hope that people who listened tonight not only heard from my story and learned something, but from everybody on this panel's story. I don't think that my story is in any way unique or special. I just think that I just got to a point where I needed to share it. I couldn't keep it in any longer. So I think I want people to know that they're not alone. And I think tonight they probably did learn that if they're sitting with something, like whether it be depression or anxiety or schizophrenia or bipolar, and they're afraid to open up and tell somebody about it, or they've attempted, or they thought maybe tonight about attempting or something like that, I want them to see our faces and know that, you know, we all kind of was on that path, but we're still here. And they're not alone in their feelings. They're not weird. It's nothing to be ashamed of, you know. The more and more I listen to people and hear about how often things of this nature happen. I mean, the stats are 1 in 4, but now I think they're probably the 4 out of 4 due to COVID and everything that we're going through and the traumas that we're going through. I'm just really starting to believe that this stuff is just a normal part of life, to be honest. And it's nothing to be ashamed of.
Thank you, Neisha. And James, last but not least, what do you hope people heard from you tonight or they hear from your story?
One of the main things I would hope is, as I said before, and Christian, shout out to you, from one man to another, affirm you in who you are and your transparency. I would say to everyone that, you know, addressing your mental health is important. And then if you feel that you have issues and not being fully healthy around the mental space, that it's okay to feel like that. When it's not okay, is when you wallow in that and when you just sit in that. So I hope that out of my story, especially to any young man or man that's dealing with issues around sexuality, if you're a young person or a young woman, we would be remiss if we did not leave you with at least a resource. There's the National Sexual Assault Hotline. That number is 1-800-656-4673, 1-800-656-4673. We brought that point up tonight. And if you are dealing with that, that is a number that you can call, and they will be able to support you and give you some information. It was very deep tonight. And I would just say that there, like others, there is hope, and your ending is not where you are now.
Thank you so much, James. And so being mindful of time, I'll ask Robin, are there any questions, Robin, that have come in, or any comments that have come in as we have been talking and sharing?
Well, you know, there hasn't been questions, but there's definitely been comments, all seeming to be affirmations. And of course, thanking you all for your honesty and for sharing your stories. I'd love to just ramble off some names because our names are up here, but I want to make sure that our viewers are mentioned and names are spoken. So Regina, thank you. Stephanie, thank you. Tara, Katie, Dr. Angela, Stephanie again, Karen, Melissa, Sharon, Be More 7, Deb, and there are a couple of resources out there, some of the viewers. Stephanie Jordan Briotti, she works in Hyannis with the Recovery Build Alternative Peer Group Program. And if you follow this thread and if you watch the program again, you'll be able to see the information there, or just look it up quickly. Also, we have from BU School of Social Work, Deb Berglund is also here tonight. And they all want to thank you all for sharing your stories with us and being honest.
Dr. Brandy, I had one comment, and it may be appropriate. It may be appropriate for other people were thinking. One of the comments that I saw is a young man was transparent about the fact that the guilt that he's feeling with his friend. Can you maybe speak, Toy, if you don't mind, speak 45 seconds to how, from a clinical standpoint, someone deals with their own guilt of, what didn't I do? Or how come I didn't, some of the stuff that Neisha was saying we should kind of see.
Yeah, there's often survivor's guilt where you reflect and you say, why didn't I see? Why didn't I know that that's what my friend, that's what my loved one was trying to tell me? And the one thing I will say with that is that we will all have those thoughts of why didn't we? Why couldn't we? And we will have to try to work through that. But the most important thing is that that individual that had that comment, you're trying to educate yourself. You're trying to get more information. You're trying to become more aware so that you can save another life who may have experienced the things your loved one did. We will all have moments where we think, gosh, if I could go back. We all have those thoughts. And so I say to you is be kind to yourself because we all have that. I've been in this field 15 years and I've had friends and family that I was just like, oh my gosh, oh my goodness. So we all have that. So be kind to yourself. You aren't the only one that may not have recognized. But what's really important is that you're trying to learn today. You're trying to gain more awareness for yourself and others in your life. And that's important. And that's something you need to acknowledge too, is guilt is a part of it for sure, but you will be okay. And because you are listening tonight, someone else might be okay. And that's important. So thank you, James, for bringing that. Thank you. That's important to acknowledge and talk about. And Robin, did anything else come up? I saw something come in the chat. So
see, someone shared a song, Be More 7. So again, when you go back to this archive, you'll be able to see it. But it's Be More 7 shared her SoundCloud song, Better Days, by Vision featuring Be More.
Yeah. Robin, one thing I'd like to do since Be More shared a song is I always like to try to end these on kind of an upbeat note because it is heavy. It's heavy what we're talking about. And so I'd like to ask all the panelists if they could briefly, Christian, just teasing you, if you could briefly talk about those things that you do now, especially now in the midst of a pandemic, in the midst of everything going on, that bring you joy, that lift you up, that help you help others. So what are those things that are really helping you stay grounded, stay centered, and continue to do the work that you're doing? So I will start, I'm just gonna go from backwards and forwards. So Toy, if you could, what are the things that are helping you these days?
What helps me is gospel music and singing. You love my singing, right, Brandy?
Yes. Let me sip on that one.
I heard it riding around in Roxbury.
Yes, singing all.
Toy, I think your internet's acting up like you're singing. Sorry, I couldn't help it. I
don't even feel like you were talking to anyone but her at that point. So I don't know what's going on before that, but.
Yes, Toy, please never quit your day job. Ooh, Lord. But yes, so Toy, singing and gospel. Thank you. Neisha, what helps you?
Yeah, I think for me, honestly, it's on a day-by-day basis. you know, depending on how I feel is, you know, what I need. I'm not afraid to set boundaries. That's one thing I talk about a lot. If I have to say no, I will say it. And some people don't like it, but you know, hey, I have to look out for myself first and foremost. If my cup is not full, I can't give. So I'm a big believer of boundaries, setting boundaries so that I am cautious of my cup, right? Cautious of the water. And then how I fill my cup up is by, you know, resting when I'm tired. If I need to take a nap, I'm gonna take it. Really giving myself compassion. And also being in communities that I feel like I can be genuine and authentic to myself. So I have a healing circle that I hang out with. Today we went hiking and we sat by the water and we literally just vented. Like, you know, my friends did a lot of venting, you know, just about things that they're dealing with. And it's kind of like group therapy, but unofficial group therapy with just some lovely people. So it just, like I said, it just depends on the day, to be honest with you, but I give myself what I need. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Barbara, what are the things that you're doing these days?
So this, of course, is absolutely one of them. Realizing all of my dreams, trying to set boundaries, but mostly for all of these years, like I said, I try to find something good to do to help others, and especially to help young folks who are struggling with their identity. For my oldest brother, Richard, it was being Cape Verdean, as you know. It was the race debate back in the early 60s, just like it is now. He tried to pass, and I was his sister looking like this, and he didn't speak to me much in high school, so that racial barrier hurt us all. So the reason I'm also not only trying to write a book, Be More 7 is my co-author. Her name is Hannah Resica, and she's an alum of Rhode Island College. So I finished my degree at 51 years old, and we're writing a book, and my chapter title is Cause of Death, Racism. And the book is titled loosely after Frederick Douglass's Oppression makes a wise man mad. So we said oppression can make a sane person mad. I wanted to just show you. I also look at my pictures. This is my baby brother, Robert, who died in 1994 at 37 years old. He left 3 children behind, 2 of which I am the godmother. He knew he was going, so he asked me to take care of his children. And this was my oldest brother, Richard, high school picture, 1967. And he's the one who inspired me with this, because he said, I am defective and I can no longer stay here. With the museum and cultural center in items like this, programs like this, I want no other person to have to feel like they are defective and they need to leave this earth.
Thank you, Barbara. And so, Christian, what helps you these days?
So I some people know I run a mobile video podcast series called Listening to Learn, where I meet with community members, from electeds to all across the board. So I believe that solutions are found through sharing your stories of lived experience. So I found a way to kind of amplify that. So probably I'm on the road maybe 30 hours a week with driving time and doing interviews and just learning about people. I'm one of those people who healed through helping others. So that's what I do. I talk to others and share stories and hear their story.
Thank you, Christian. Robin, we normally don't, include you in the conversation, but I want to include you. what are the things that you're doing these days? And then I'll end with James and some brief comments.
For self-care, it's for me, it's usually music and healthy eating. So I do a lot of farming, or I should say gardening, because it's a smaller plot of land, but a lot of gardening and a lot of healthy cooking.
Okay, all right. You can share some of the fruits of your labor?
Absolutely.
That's one of these days?
Yes, absolutely.
All right, and James, last but not least, what are you doing these days?
These days, Java with Jimmy, as much as people say it helps them, Java with Jimmy is a help to me. I would say opposite of Robin. Part of my self-care or staying focused is I kind of eat unhealthy here and there. And then Robin, right at the end of, not Robin, Brandy, whoever's going last, I have a surprise for Toy. So before you totally let people go, just tell me to go ahead and hit play. And we'll go for, look at Toy's face. She's like, what are you about to play? I'm playing it at the very end in case they kick us off for copyrights. But Toy, when y'all let me know, and I'm gonna hit play, and we gonna have fun with Toy.
So all I'm gonna say is, again, I thank all the panelists. Robin, thank you as always for welcoming us, and because you always have a special way of welcoming and embracing everyone in the room. Barbara, thank you, because you really were the catalyst for tonight's conversation. Christian, as always, I learned something from you. I'm grateful you're always a part of the panel. Neisha, yeah, like I want to like be in pure spark. I mean, yeah, I just learned so much, even from your Facebook posts and stuff. Like I still remember the post where you said somebody asked you, why are you going to sleep at 7 p.m.? Are you a baby? And you were like, no, I care about myself. Like that still stays in my mind. So I thank you for everything you do. And Toy, you already know, other than your singing, you're amazing and wonderful. So other than that,
I really hope that video is this gospel singing.
And James, you know, I really appreciate you for being our kind of technology guru, but more so than that, I really definitely connect with Toy in that I felt you went somewhere tonight that you haven't gone before. And I feel it was powerful, and I feel somebody out there heard it and needed to hear it. And so I'm so thankful for that. And I'll just end by saying, you know, I hope everyone listening learned something, got something from it. We shared resources, we shared ourselves as well. We'll have future events. We have an event next week. You know, the kids are going back to school. So we need to talk about that. We need to talk about our youth and our young people. And so next week will be focused more so on our youth and our young people and the things that they are struggling with or have struggled with. As well, DeeDee'sCry.com for more information to get involved with our events. And one thing I want to highlight is through generous support that DeeDee's Cry received from the Boston Foundation, we are also offering COVID-19 Relief Fund. And so on our site, you can go and get information. We are giving gift cards to families, to individuals, because we know people are struggling right now. And one way we can help is by helping you financially. And so please go on the website, complete an application. We still have some gift cards that we can give out. We're gonna give them out until we run out. So please go on the website, fill out an application so we can help you and yours, and you know, help others. If it's not for you, send it to somebody else. So Toy, I know you have a comment or two, maybe.
Well, just let people know, I thought you would do it, how they can support DeeDee's Cry.
Oh, yeah. So you can always donate. You know, funds are always welcome. Your time is appreciated too. If you want to partner with us on events and do something like this for your community, we can do it virtually, or hopefully if we ever get out our homes again, we'll be able to do it face to face. So we are here. We hope that you gain some information, you learn something, and we hope you have a good night. But before you leave, James has a treat. a wonderful toy who brought us together. So James.
Yes. Hold on, because I don't want, if we get kicked off all of a sudden, good night, everybody. Hold on. This is one of Toy's favorite artists. I thought it was a video, but she'll be satisfied with the picture. Y'all have a good night, everybody. Whenever y'all want to get off, just let me know, and we'll just go off till they kick us off. Shout out to the great Walter Beasley.
Thank you so much, everyone. Remember, cry next week.
I turned it down so they could hear you. Brandy said she wanted to go out with a bang, so I'll just, when all start clicking off, I'll end once the last person clicks off. So Facebook kicks us off.
Thank you, Barbara.
Look, y'all don't want to go nowhere, so in that case then.
In the meeting.
Okay, y'all have a wonderful evening. As the digital director of DeeDee's Cry, thank you all so much for tuning in tonight. There's more to come. There's more to come. There's a YouTube page as well. So please check it out, everybody. Have a good night, everyone.
Good night.
Thank you, one and all. This was wonderful.